What's up everybody, welcome to Risky Business. So if you're watching this video, chances are you already know what Launchbox is, but just in case you're not sure, Launchbox is a front end that you use for your emulators. As it says here on their website, emulate, organize, and beautify your game collection. And that's exactly what Launchbox does. It gives you a UI that unifies all your platforms together. You can see artwork, including box art, screenshots, and more for all of your games, marquee images, everything you could think of, game music, and even video clips as well. So a lot of cool stuff available, whether you want to do a desktop UI like I'm going to show you here, or whether you want to use it for a cabinet or another build. I actually use it for my smart TV. I use Steam Link to broadcast my PC onto my living room TV, and when I do that, I use the Big Box UI. That Big Box UI is a great couch emulation UI as well. Controller, sit on the couch and have a nice big beautiful UI that you can use the controller comfortably. That looks great. Launchbox itself is free, but if you want the Big Box UI, you do have to purchase a license. Personally, I feel that it's worth the money, but of course that is up to you. I want to go ahead and give you the website URL to download the application, which is launchbox-app.com. You'll see there's both a Windows and an Android download there. We're going to do the Windows download in this particular case, but if you have an Android box, you can also download that to the Android box as well. Now, I have not used the Android version of this app, so if you have, let me know in the comments what you think of it. When you go to the website, you're going to see the Download Now button, and when you click on that, unlike your typical download, this is actually going to ask you for your email address, and then it's going to send you a download link via your email. Now, in the interests of privacy, I'm going to obscure some of what you're going to see on the screen here, but the main thing that you should be seeing is going to be the Launchbox download link, which is right here. So you click on this download here button, and that will begin your download. So just like any other download that you do through your browser, once that is finished, you can go ahead and launch the application. And once you run the installer, you're going to be asked what language you want. You'll be asked to accept the terms of the license agreement. And of course, you will be asked where you would like to install. Now, this does require quite a bit of disk space, 873 megabytes. That's quite a chunk of disk space. So just make sure you have enough space in the designated drive that you want to save it to. Now, the default location is a terrible place to save anything, so I recommend making sure that you find a nicer place for it. I'm just going to create a directory in the root of my C drive called Launchbox for the purposes of this demonstration. And then you click on the install link, and of course, it'll install the application. If you get any prompts like this one, go ahead and click yes. Once the application has been installed, you're going to see a UI just like this one that asks you what you would like to do. They made it real super easy. Now, before you go any further, if you're finding this information helpful, please do go ahead and like and subscribe to the video, and throw me a comment, let me know what you think. Moving right along, we're going to go ahead and choose to import ROM files, and we'll use the built-in wizard and see how that goes for us. So we'll click next. And then of course it gives you a UI here, pretty similar to what you might find elsewhere in your Windows environment. Just looks a little bit different. So we'll click the add folder, and then we'll go to our folder where our ROMs live. So I'm just going to install my NES ROMs here. And it's pretty smart, right? It already figured out, because I have a folder called NES, that these ROMs are for the Nintendo Entertainment System. And that's why it's asking us what platform we're importing for. And it likes to organize things that way. So we'll click on next there, because that is the correct platform. And this is actually a really cool feature that was added recently. You can automatically install and configure RetroArch, or you can manually configure your emulator and choose the emulator that you would like to use. I personally prefer to use RetroArch for everything, but if your preference is different, you can configure whatever emulator you prefer. For our purposes here, I'm going to choose manually configure because I've already installed RetroArch. But if you haven't, you'll click on the automatically install and configure RetroArch button instead. So now this drop down is going to be blank at first. So you're going to click add, and then you're going to choose which emulator you're going to be adding. You can choose from the drop down. The Launchbox database has pretty much every emulator out there in it already. You browse to the application path, and again, if you're just going to let it install RetroArch for you, then you don't have to do this. Now the rest of this stuff for now, it's best to leave blank. These are more specialized commands that you're only going to use if you really need to. And it's something that if you have questions about in the future, we can possibly dive into in another tutorial. So we finished adding our emulator. That's really all we need for the time being. We'll click on OK. And now it knows which emulator we would like to use. Once again, if you're going to allow Launchbox to install RetroArch for you, you don't need to do that step. You can just click on the Install and Configure RetroArch option, and Launchbox will do the rest. Now this is a really important question. Whenever you import ROMs, it's going to ask you, do you want to copy, move, or use in their current location? That's completely up to you, but just take a note here. Copy the files into my Launchbox Games folder and it gives you a path. Move the files into my Launchbox Games folder and gives you a path. Or use files in their current location. So if you don't want to move or copy your ROMs and leave them where they are, you're going to use that third option. If you would like to keep all your games under your Launchbox installation folder, you can use one of these too, depending on disk space and your preference. I like to leave them in the current location and have my ROMs set apart from everything else, so I'm going to choose that option. Now, metadata is what's going to tell Launchbox what game this is. So this is super important, and I want you to just make a note of this. Your ROM files for best results should be in the universal format, the no-intro format. That's super important because you're only going to get the correct metadata automatically if they are. If they're named any other way, you're going to have to manually add the metadata later. So go ahead and click next here. And it's going to ask you what images you want to download. And you can see there's a tremendous number of images here. Now I'm just going to go ahead and do all of them, but you might want to pick and choose. Maybe you don't want all of these different kinds of artwork. It's totally up to you. Now, for the next part, EmuMovies is kind of a tertiary piece. So if you want to download attract mode video clips, you would need a membership to EmuMovies, and that does have a subscription. So that's once again up to you. If you don't want to do that, you actually can manually add your own video clips. Again, totally optional things here. Do you want the game manual? Do you want to combine ROMs with matching titles into a single game? So that'll organize things a lot better. So for example, if you have like the US and Japanese versions of a specific game, then by choosing this option, you're going to have only one item in Launchbox, and then you can right click it and choose which version you want to launch. If you uncheck that, you'll have a different menu item for each game. And of course, force importing duplicate games. If you have more than one copy of the exact same game, maybe you might want to have multiple copies for some reason. So you could click that. Or if you already have a game imported and you're importing a new version of that game, import files from specified folders only and not subfolders if you have other files underneath that you don't want to pull in. And force using MAME metadata for emulators other than MAME that use MAME files. You're probably not going to check that most of the time, but if you're using MAME to emulate everything, then you would check that. Now here's a really, really important note. I only have the one game here for now. Now when you do this, you might have a lot more games depending how many ROMs you have. It's gonna take a really long time if you have a lot of, it's downloading a lot of stuff. My recommendation is to do this in batches. If you have a lot of games and you're gonna import a lot of stuff, I wouldn't do it through this wizard. I would do it manually, and I'll show you how to do that a little bit later in the video. If you've just got a few, then this is probably fine. We have Final Fantasy, which is the only ROM that I have in here. It actually shows you the path. It shows you the name, the correct naming convention, the no-intro naming convention, title, and then in parentheses, the country. And it found the title, Final Fantasy. So Launchbox knows, based on the correct file name, what game this is. So we click on finish, and now it is initializing, importing. And once, like I said before, this is going to take much longer depending how many games you have. So now if you look, you can see that we have successfully imported Final Fantasy. We have our box art right here. Right click on the title, go to media, and you can just manually view all of the images that you have installed for this particular game. So it looks like here we have the box art, we have the front and back, we have the 3D box art, the logo, an image of the cartridge, a high resolution logo, some of the game artwork. We have a screenshot here, screenshots again, and that's all we have for Final Fantasy, which I think is pretty cool. You just click again and it'll go back the other way. Now you can do a lot of customization here, and we can get more into that in a future video if you would like. So if you haven't done so already, please subscribe and enable notifications so you don't miss the next emulation tutorial. And if you have any specific questions about Launchbox that you would like addressed in a future video, let me know in the comments below. Now we've used the wizard to import a game, but what if you would like to import games manually? As I said before, if you have a large collection, it's better to bring them in manually. That way you can bring in a few at a time and it doesn't take quite as long. So here I have my Street Fighter 2 ROM. I'm going to go ahead and pull that into Launchbox, and I'm going to do that manually, simply by dragging and dropping from Windows into my Launchbox app. So now it's going to ask me a question. What are we importing? Because we didn't use a wizard, so it sees a file is here, and I'm trying to pull it in, but it doesn't know what to do with it yet. So we're going to say ROM files. And look at how smart Launchbox is here. It already knows just based on the file name that this is a Super Nintendo game. So we'll go to next. It'll ask you what emulator you want to choose. We're going to go ahead and leave it with the default because we already set up RetroArch before. But if you haven't set up your emulator yet, this would be where you would go to add and follow the steps we followed earlier to manually add your emulator. So we'll move on. And once again, you're going to choose from the same options you chose from before. I'm going to keep my files in their current location. And then we're going to follow the same process we followed earlier when we imported Final Fantasy. And if you skipped ahead in the video, just pop back there if you want to see the whole process. And now you can see that Street Fighter 2 has been successfully imported into Launchbox. So, we're doing really great here with this, and it's been super easy so far, right? Now, there's so much more you can do in Launchbox, and this is more of just a crash course of how to get started with it. Now I'll just show you a couple of really quick, cool things. This left-hand panel lets you decide how you want to view these games. So if you go to Platform, now you have all your platforms here, and you can go from one to another, and you can choose from this drop-down however you would like your games to be sorted in your library. By genre, by database ID, play mode, all these different kinds of things here. And as you can see, we have a lot of metadata. We have the release dates of these games. If you look in the right-hand panel, it gives you information like the release date, publisher, tells you the file name, it gives you a full description, and you can see here we have all that artwork was populated into the right-hand column. We talked before about Big Box and how that works. In order to give you a good demo of Big Box, I think I want to go ahead and just show you my full running configuration I have on my own PC. So we're going to cut to that in just a moment. But before we do, I just wanted to show you, if you want to change the images that are displayed here, you can go over here on the upper right side to Image Group, and you can select 3D boxes, carts, and you can change this on the fly. So whichever image you prefer. So I've just pulled up Big Box. I have a custom launch screen here, so you can actually download a splash screen, whatever splash screen you prefer. There are all different kinds of UIs you can play with. You can change the UI. You can do so much with it. Yeah, you have these really cool videos that you get if you used Emu Movies to download those and set those up. You can't hear it now, but there's also game music playing in the background as I scroll through. And we can scroll through our various platforms. And this is kind of a little bit like an attract mode that you might get if you're looking at an arcade machine, which is why this is perfect for arcade cabinets. So let's go ahead and just look real quick at, for example, why don't we look at the PlayStation? All right. So we'll go ahead and take a look through our PlayStation games. And you can see we have a video playing in the background, like an attract mode video. And we can flip through the games. Now this is just my current preference of how I decided to set this up. You might like it a little bit of a different layout, and you can change to a number of different layouts here. There we go. See, you can change to screen. Ooh, look at that. Pretty nice, right? There we go. So you have many different options in terms of how you would like to explore your game list here. What a very, very cool attract mode that is. And that's it. That's kind of the quick and dirty crash course of how to get started with Launchbox. I know a lot of people have questions about emulators and front ends and how to get things up and running. So once again, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments. I'll be happy to help you out. I know I haven't done an emulation video in a while. These are probably going to be something I do once in a while. Mostly I'll collect your questions, and then I'll probably try to do one every month or 2 or 3, depending on how many questions I get, just to address whatever questions that come up. There's so much that you can do in Launchbox. It's impossible to cover it all in one video. Otherwise, the video would be hours and hours long. So I hope this was a good getting your feet wet sort of a video for Launchbox. Give me your questions in the comments, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. You can follow me on social media. The links are in the description. If you are so inclined, you can join Patreon. I'll have more kind of behind the scenes stuff up there. And I guess that's it for now. Yeah. So thank you very much for watching, and until next time, game over.